How's it going, guys? It's Criptobud here for today. In another episode here, I want to talk a little bit about the escalating trade war that we're having with China. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I did post a video regarding the implications of a trade war with cryptocurrencies. And so I really want to focus this attention that cryptocurrencies and countries and also governments and institutional investors plus investors, we're all in the same boat. The reality is you cannot say I am a crypto investor and I am a stock investor or I'm a bond. You basically are all sloshing money around the same way as these equity investors are. So it's very important to take a look at what's happening outside of crypto and not just look at the tech and the projects, because yes, that's a huge part of finding good fundamental projects. But more importantly, it has a lot to do with the fact that money attracts money. And that's a very simple idea, but many people fail to see that. And when you don't have your 10x gains, you don't have your 20x gains, it's easy to say, oh, this project sucks. And the reality is that it's more complicated than that. It's not just about the tech. It's not just about the projects. The technology is there, but you do need all these pieces put in play. And I think a lot of people kind of got caught up with the fact that there was a secondary element that came in 2017 that a lot of people mistook for being superior technology, because we already know that that's not the case. Ethereum and Bitcoin is a great example of tech that has not been flushed out even at the highest levels of coin market cap. And so before we kind of dive into that, let's take a look at today's news piece about the ongoing trade war with China and the United States. And if you're a non-Chinese citizen and you're not a U.S. citizen, I think it's still important to take a look at, because these two countries are your largest trading partners and they control a very large percentage of the overall GDP in the world, like it or not. And so when these countries do business, it basically is going to affect it's going to have a ripple effect across the board. And so currently what we're having right now is, in the last iteration, we had the Trump administration was talking a little bit about putting in tariffs against the Chinese, and the Chinese are retaliating with a tariff, escalating what they call a trade war. And I'm always for a free market. I'm for a market that allows capitalism to do its thing. And whenever we have government interventions in it, for whatever reason, it tends to either distort prices on the upside or distort prices on the downside. And the example I like to give here is Venezuela, right? It's a failed experiment in socialism and a failed experiment in trying to manage economies using outdated economic principles. And so currently what we have here is that the Chinese holdings have really dropped in the last couple of months. They basically dumped, the same thing with the Russians. They've dumped up a lot of the U.S. treasuries, and as you already know, China is one of our biggest creditors. We borrow a lot of money from them, and they basically get fiat, and we pay them an interest so that they could end up we can run our deficit. The reality, what's happening here is that the bonds have begun to really spike up. And so there's this thing called the inverted yield curve, where basically the short-term interest rates and the long-term interest rates begin to reverse. Without going further into detail about that, because I can do it in a separate video, the idea here is that the U.S. Treasury bills notes went down to a 6-month low of 1.71 trillion from 1.178 trillion in June. And that's a massive amount of money that is leaving that system. Now, month to month, it's not really too much of a difference, but on the long term, if this continues, what's going to happen is that you're going to end up having to find another country that's going to pick up the slack. And so the idea here is that the way that government will usually do this is they'll try to raise the interest rates to attract new investors. In Japan, usually it's the trading partner that kind of picks up the slack for some of the stuff that the other countries are not buying. And so increasing the actual tariffs escalates this trade war, because what's going to happen is that they're going to retaliate, and then there's going to be this issue with trade. Now, how does this kind of fall in line with crypto? So if you take a look at the Shanghai Stock Exchange, you can kind of see that the Asian market also has its boom and bust cycles. It looks actually very similar to Bitcoin. In fact, the Chinese, growth rate has been in the double digits since 2007. Currently, it's kind of fallen down a little bit. But if you take a look at what's happened back in 2007, it had a massive run. Had you put money in the Chinese Stock Exchange, specifically in the Shanghai Index, you would have had a massive run. And all of a sudden, we had that massive drop as well. Now, something similar happened here in 2014, and it hit 2015 one more time. So it took this market 7 years here to kind of do its thing, I guess you want to call it. And then we had a little stealth rally, what I call it, here from 2016 all the way up to, guess what? January of 2018. Now, this is a stealth rally because I don't consider this to be a rally where it went parabolic, unlike what we had here back in 15 and in 7. And what happened there was the Chinese economy was running really red hot. And like all things, eventually cools down. But here's where it gets really interesting. If you take a look at Bitcoin's price, right, back in 2015, you can kind of see that we did have a rally starting from 15 all the way up to 17. And obviously with peaking out around 18 as well. And also, if you want to take a look at the last rally we had was back in 13. So there's a couple of data points that I'm looking at, but what I've come to the conclusion is that these two events are not mutually exclusive. I do believe that the capital entering into that market back in 2000, back in 2000 here, actually had to exit somewhere. And what happened was it actually ran into crypto from the Asian markets. And so if history is any indicator, same thing in 2007, this money had to go somewhere, giving us that rally that we had in Bitcoin in 2013, is that this is actually a leading indicator going into Bitcoin. Now, again, you might say, well, wait a minute. Why are you saying this if the crypto markets are global? Why are you focusing on China? Well, the first thing I want to mention is that if you take a look at the Chinese Bitcoin price, and I'm not going to focus on a lot of the Asian, what they call altcoins, is because right now what you're seeing is a lot of the top 10 exchanges, a lot of them are actually being brought up, are actually in Asia. Specifically, they're actually Chinese exchanges. So let me give you an example. This exchange that just came out here called BitForex. These are actually high volume trades, kind of like similar to the BitMEXs that you'll find. And what you'll find with these exchanges is that they basically are, I would have to say almost like gambling, but they're a high frequency trader, and they actually focus a lot on active trading. And so that money is coming from somewhere. It's not coming accidentally for everybody. They're marketing it specifically for Chinese. And this is actually a Chinese exchange. Another one that we've had also has been, if you kind of take a look at the exchanges, has been BitThumb, which we already know for Korea. And we also know Binance, which obviously caters to the Asian, but definitely they moved to Malta, so it's a little bit of a different story. And BitMEX has actually been rising in terms of volume now. So what I'm seeing here in terms of trends is that there is going to be a focus now towards trading, high volume trading for Bitcoin in many of these exchanges. Now, in terms of retail money and all of that, I think that's going to take a while. But if history is any indication, after this, if we get another massive boom in the Shanghai index, and let's assume tomorrow we take off, I do think there's going to be more money to be splashed around that's going to eventually trickle over to crypto. Now, right now, the market's going down for Shanghai, so I do expect this market to kind of trade sideways because that money has to come from somewhere. And right now, it's the traders, the really good traders that basically are coming in with very large sums of money and are basically passing money back and forth. But if history is any indication, I do believe that there's going to be a time when the Asian market, and you already know that most of the new ICOs and most of the coins are coming out from the Asia. is that there is going to be a demand for crypto as long as we monitor the specific signals that are coming in from these global markets. And so this is actually just one data point that I'm looking at. I mean, there's multiple areas because I don't always like to say, look, I think it's going to be this, that's going to be moving it up. But there's definitely going to be a lot of different points. And so I'm just ready for that day to come so that I can catch the next wave, what they call it. And so that's what I do with my group. That's what I do with people that, you know, are following me, is we talk about these. And so there is a situation and there comes a point in time when you want to ride these waves. And these waves are going to be wave one right here in 2005. Obviously, after that, we had the Bitcoin wave. We had another wave in 2014, and that kind of dropped again. And then we had that massive 18 run. And again, coincidentally, what happened here at the peak of the market was February of 18 in the Shanghai stock market. And so definitely there's been this kind of slow decline here. But if history is any indication again of these situations, we will find a bottom in the Shanghai stock exchange at some point where valuations are going to get really, really good. People are going to pile in. And then what's going to happen there is that there is going to be new fresh money to be deployed into a very depressed crypto market. So keep that in mind, and then hopefully you guys find this informative. CryptoBud out.